At first, Lucy and Ethel feel confident about their new job, but as the conveyor belt starts moving faster and faster, they struggle to keep up.
Right. And they start stuffing the chocolates into their mouths and their shirts.
Yeah, and their supervisor comes back and sees that the conveyor belt is empty and tells them what a great job they're doing. Then she shouts for it to speed up. They realize they're doomed. It's classic.
Welcome to the Career Corrective, your career lifeline that gives you laugh lines with Jenny and Allie.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Last episode, we talked about self-boundaries. Today, we want to talk about how to deal with, address, process emotions. Why, you may ask? Great question, listeners. You're always so on point. It's because we know that all the stuff that we're talking about here, if you're doing any part of it other than making Greek yogurt recipes that we suggest, it's going to bring up some kind of stuck emotions when you go for things in a new way, when you work at things in a new way, or maybe it's not a new way, but maybe we're just reminding you of some habits you wanted to give a whirl. But if you're doing anything of what we're talking about, stuff that was sedentary inside you, those emotions that lay dormant, they're going to start to work their way up to the surface. And so we want to be proactive and give you some tools to help you with that so they don't get in your way and throw you off track.
Yes. Emotions. Mariah Carey sang about them. Right?
Yeah.
Don't make me sing it right now because I can't. But
those are some sweet high notes.
Oof, and I cannot get there. But the show Euphoria is an emotion, right?
True. Yeah.
Yeah. The show Shameless pays homage to the emotion of shame.
It's true. It sure does.
Yeah. Big time shame. Desperate Housewives, obviously, desperation. And I think this will really help our listeners if we dive into these TV shows and songs.
Well, where does Desperado by the Eagles land in all of this?
Oh my gosh.
What is that?
That's the...
No, is he a person? Wait, what is Desperado? Why don't you come to your senses? I don't know. It's deep. It's melancholy. It's depressing.
I can't get into it. I can't get into that right now. No.
Totally. That's too many emotions we didn't prepare for.
I can deal with a few, but not that one.
Okay, gotcha.
All right. So can you tell us about emotions as it relates to the I Love Lucy episode we were talking about in our opening?
I think of emotions like the chocolates on the conveyor belt. And yes. Personally, I'm someone who for many years was in the camp of power through in life. Really hard worker, a you can do it kind of person. But the way I used to get through things is that coach kind of sports mentality of dig deep. What I realized as I started to read about and incorporate self-compassion and make things a little bit looser, more balanced for myself in my goals and achievement, and now helping others with it, is that before I was ignoring a lot of what was going on, and emotions are a huge part of that. So this is just personal to me. I am not a scientist. I am not a doctor. It's just something personally through tons of work and refinement has helped me. And I think those chocolates are coming fast and furious on the conveyor belt, whether I see them or I don't. They're there. I proactively deal with those chocolates. I make a habit to process emotions. So I get them early on the conveyor belt. It's a way that I like to deal with emotions, whether I think they're there or feel them or I don't. It's just a habit. It's makes me more back to center and clear so I can get to all the fun stuff and all the goals in a way that feels lighter. It feels more inspiring rather than the old way, which was to power through.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you've been unbelievably helpful for me. I'm excited that you're going to share it with our listeners. So, can you give them some info on this topic so we can kind of lay the groundwork for our discussion?
Yes, if we bring it to the experts and the scientists, if you look at things like there's a website for the Anxiety and Depression Association of America, there's a Library of Medicine, National Library of Medicine, the statistics on feeling anxiety manifests in so many different ways. If you look at those facts and statistics, that can probably cause anxiety.
Oh, my goodness. Yes.
Breaks it down into generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, social anxiety disorder, specific phobias, stress, obsessive compulsive disorder. The list goes on, and it talks about the millions of people. I'm not going to break that down. We could probably link this information in the episode description if you all want to dive into that. The reason I'm bringing it up, though, for sake of this discussion, is that my thought is if you're at work, we always talk about career stress. That's why we're here. And dealing with stress, my thought is if you're the 2020s and you're doing life, you're going to experience anxiety in one way or another.
Yeah. I feel like it's gotten worse over time for everyone.
There's all this, I don't have the data in front of me. I'm just referencing it at a high level, but there's a lot of information out there, and maybe we could talk about it in an episode to really get into the details. But just for now, the use of social media for kids and how that's exacerbated a lot, created a lot, and this feeling of, and I know that other people have talked about this, but I think there's a bunch of different pieces to social media being so prevalent. It's this idea of people create this perfect image so then it can get into some analytical self-doubt issues and wondering if you measure up, having that access to people, that always on feeling. There's just a bunch of different things that as we evolve, it feels like more pressure. And I think there was something I read was about how the loneliness of social media is that we have all this technology. We've never been more connected, but we've never been more alone. I think there's a ton of stuff that goes into that. But if you think about it, the other pieces, I think anxiety is just more, it's okay to talk about it more than it was in the past. For sake of our discussion today, we talk about career stress. Anxiety at its lightest form is a reaction to stress. So in that, if we look at what the scientists say, anxiety is when your amygdala, that part of the brain, is overactive. If you are stressed, you're reacting with feeling anxious, your amygdala is on high alert. At work, this can result in a lot of the themes that we talk about: procrastination or avoidance because you have fear of failure. It's not as easy for you to make decisions. You feel kind of stuck, kind of foggy. That's the overactive amygdala. That leads to second guessing yourself. You're kind of frozen, or you're scared you're going to be criticized. Public speaking, I think they say people fear public speaking more than they fear death. So it doesn't have to be that you have it. And I don't want to get into those nuances. We want to be helpful to you if you're stressed at work, and anxiety is a way that manifests. That's just what we're going to be talking about today.
Okay. Yeah, I know my amygdala has been stressing me out. I've been feeling it.
Well,
But
that Even saying that, I've been really thinking about this as a tool lately and thinking about talking to our listeners on the podcast and coaching, but thinking about talking to your amygdala just kind of interrupts that circuit.
Yes.
Calling it out, because then you can say, my amygdala is overreacting. You're not lumping onto you, I have anxiety, I feel anxious. It makes you feel lighter to interrupt yourself and say, whoa, my amygdala is really on fire today. That kind of thing, I think, is just a little tiny helpful tool.
It is. Absolutely. We're going to get into how to handle this later, but first let's get into some theories of emotion. Can you tell us what you know about the first one, the somatic marker hypothesis?
Absolutely. The feeling of, or people say a lot of times, I knew in my gut.
Yes.
My gut feel, right?
Yeah, that's what I say.
It's exactly what you
That's what I be saying.
Jenny. If you think about when you're about to make a big decision, do you want to take a job offer? Or you get that, sometimes it's that pit in your stomach or the gut feeling that it's a yes. You get that rush of excitement. According to the somatic marker hypothesis, this was by Antonio Damasio.
It's a name.
Yeah.
I like that name.
Do you want that to be your new podcast name?
Just refer to me as Damasio.
Okay.
I love it. Okay, sorry.
Then people might get you confused with Joe DiMaggio, who was
which is fine by me.
Yeah, he was a Yankee player. If you're a Red Sox fan, then that's a no-go.
But that's a no-no.
But those bodily sensations in this hypothesis are somatic markers. I think there's a lot of people online talking now about somatic release and how you can reduce stress, release stress through these somatic flows, maybe yoga flows or different somatic processes and practices. That's what this is referring to. Emotions create those physical reactions in the body. And at its simplest form, your heart races when you're nervous. You talk about getting butterflies in your stomach when you're excited. These are the signals that your body is telling you, hey, I'm going to decide if this is good for me or bad for me based on if I'm getting the butterflies or the racing heart. Over time, those signals give us internal shortcuts, will let us know what our past experiences have turned out to be when we face a similar choice. I can see that is helpful, but it also can throw us off track because you can be off to the races with a feeling that feels similar but is misinterpreted or different based on a new person, a new experience. Just be aware that those are indicators, but more needs to be incorporated into that to really see what's going on rather than just going off of the physical reaction.
Right. It's almost alluding to that it's kind of like a liar, like anxiety's a liar.
Yeah, that was one of our recent episodes. We called her a liar and a jerk.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah, I do. I do remember.
I think that's the scientific term. Anxiety is a liar and a jerk. So write that down.
And you can look it up. There's tons of articles about it.
That we wrote.
Yeah, exactly.
She's so stupid. She's tacky. And
I don't even like her. She's not even funny.
Gossip is never okay unless you're gossiping about anxiety because she's earned it.
She's earned it.
I hate her.
All right. Let's get back.
No, I can't get back on track because when you think about it,
I love this.
Is the original gossiper. I mean, she's the one spreading the lies.
Yeah. I mean, feel free to look up the articles that I wrote. You'll have to search Antonio Damasio. But They're there.
Infringement rights. It's Antonio Desmazio. If you see any articles by Antonio Desmazio where she's talking in the style of Nick Kroll on Liz and Liz Publicity, you can't even believe what anxiety was doing today. She wore a salmon color suit to the meeting.
Like, what is that name? Anxiety? It's terrible.
I think
All
this
right.
is really strong content right here.
I do too. This is where it gets good. All right. Can you talk to us about the theory of constructed emotion?
I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but at work,
Yes.
if your boss could call you, hit you up on chat, or in a meeting say something, and just by what you know about them,
Yes.
I'll give you an example.
Yes, please.
I had a boss who every time they were going to try and get me to do their work and take credit for it,
Yeah.
it would always start out with explaining what a great opportunity this was for me.
Bullshit. Right there.
And the beginning would always be, hey, I have something great for you. If it was going to be a more neutral topic or something that wasn't her trying to convince me of it, it would be something more general, like, hey, do you have a few minutes to chat? Which nobody wants to hear from their boss either.
Yeah, right.
Because you have a history with that person. When they say that intro statement, hey, I have something great for you, your emotions are going to react to all of what happened before and predict that they're going to ask you and try and get you to do their work again.
Yeah. Get some new lines. Jeez.
Well, that's my interpretation of the theory of constructed emotion. It suggests that emotions aren't fixed reactions. They're actually predictions our brain makes based on past experiences. The way that I felt that before was the example of if somebody has a certain way to deliver information, I would just be guessing like, here we go again.
Right. Let's see what this is going to be.
So these are just ways to think about, yes, those things have panned out before, but it's not always the case. And it's your emotions doing work. It's not logic. It's not you looking into it. It's not waiting and making a judgment. It's getting ahead of ourselves. And if it turns out to be true a lot of the time, that doesn't mean that the emotions were telling you it was something true. It means that they're giving you a heads up, but then see what plays out rather than letting them take over and be your 100% answer.
Great. I want to give you a scenario on how this could play out.
Okay.
Let's say Jake, he's been dealing with anxiety at work, especially when his boss gives him feedback. So every time he hears, let's talk about your performance, his stomach tightens, his heart races, and he instantly assumes it's the worst. And his brain labels this sensation as fear. Based on the theory, how would you help him handle this situation or at least move it in a helpful direction?
I think I mentioned this before, and I just want you to know I'm aware I'm repeating this.
Okay.
I think the best place to start always is to create some space for yourself. And I know how quickly life happens. You don't want to be staring blankly when someone asks you something, but hey, Jake.
You're like, hang on a minute. I need a minute. Yes.
If you can interrupt your normal patterns, pausing is your best friend. So for Jake, the next time he is approached by his boss and feels that rush of anxiety, he could pause and ask himself, what if my brain isn't reacting? It's actually predicting. And I'm saying it slowly, but your brain works very fast. And then continue from there. What if this feeling isn't fear, but anticipation? What am I afraid of? Have I ever actually been yelled at? Or am I borrowing stress from past experiences?
Yes.
Just reframing your reaction because it's uncomfortable, but that's not proof that something bad will happen. It's your brain making a guesstimate, making a hypothesis. And I understand a lot of people could react to this and say like, no, but every time my boss is a jerk. And I'm not saying your boss isn't a jerk. They probably are. But it's you working with yourself to be your best, because we can't control the fact that your boss isn't the best. You can empower yourself to take things one step at a time the best you can.
Right. Yep. I love it because you're all about working that muscle, right?
Yeah.
And this has been really helpful for me as we've worked through this with my anxiety and things like that. So I think for Jake over time, this small shift is going to help him take the feedback less personally and more constructively.
Yeah. And there's I read this somewhere. I'm sorry. A lot of times I just have so much information in my brain and I don't always know where I saw it, but I read a lot of psychology. I am not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I just read a ton. Just a
Yes.
disclaimer there. But I love this statement, which is fear and excitement are neighbors in the brain. When you're nervous about something or you feel like, oh, am I in trouble or is this bad? It could mean I'm excited or I really care about this or I'm really invested in this. If you think about work, of course you're invested, even if you don't feel that way right now, because it's your livelihood. Of course you have a lot of at stake there. It's just little tiny ways to start to approach it that little bit differently over time. The final one we have on this topic of the way that emotions are present in your world is called the higher order theory of emotion, consciousness and fear. If you think about if you've ever reacted to something before realizing why, you hear a loud noise and you jump. You don't know if that's a monster. You just jumped. The higher order theory of emotion explains that emotions involve both fast, unconscious reactions, like flinching when you hear a loud sound. And then they also involve slower, conscious experiences, like realizing you're afraid, whatever it is, and deciding how to respond. This is why horror movies make us jump. Well, by that genre, you would know it really is something bad. The guy probably is standing behind the other person with the knife. So that is scary.
Exactly. Yes.
But you may even hear a noise in a horror movie and it's just someone making the popcorn for the movie. They're not going to die for at least 30 minutes. Just the fact that you can think about all this is going on, which won't get into how amazing all the systems of the human psyche, body, and all of how we work together. But think about all of this machinery going on, and so much is out of our awareness. We just know work was stressful that day. When you stop and think about it this way, you can just move the needle that little bit to question, maybe if I look at this a little differently, or just start to question or interrupt that circuit pattern, my emotions can start to rule my day a little bit less. It doesn't change the fact that Harold from accounting is annoying, Helen
Oh
from
my
HR is
gosh.
annoying.
Right.
But there you go. That's our little foundation for today.
That's wonderful. Yeah. I feel like when you're already in that elevated state of anxiety, you are more sensitive to things.
Yeah.
And so it's important to kind of take it down, get yourself into a better space where those things don't feel like they're compounding.
And like
So-
we said earlier, you were saying you feel like it's getting worse. And I was talking about the stats on the official diagnosis and categorizations. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about your amygdala being at a heightened state and all of this going on because you're stressed from work. That's it. I mean, just
Yes.
even if you don't identify with that categorization, that's okay. It's just these things are heightened when life is heightened, and that's the awareness that we're bringing to it.
Right. And I think that's why it's so important. Excuse me. I think it's so important that you do take time out for yourself when you're feeling the anxiety to go do something, an activity or something you enjoy, because that's going to bring you down and kind of level you out.
Back to center,
Let's get back with the Beatles.
where you once belong.
I have another scenario for you.
Oh, like a game.
Yeah, I love playing the games. All right. Let's say Sheila always struggles with social anxiety, especially in meetings. Whenever she's called on unexpectedly, her heart pounds, her face flushes. This used to be me, by the way. She
Are you
stumbles over
Sheila?
her words. Yeah, we are the same. But before she even thinks about it, her body just reacts with fear, like she's in danger. Based on this theory, what would you tell her the steps are to take?
All right. Pretty much a broken record. Interrupt things, question things. This is my go-to, looking at things a different way and reframing. But the self-talk would be noticing my fear response is automatic. It's my amygdala doing its job. The amygdala is on your nerves.
A little, yeah.
Then taking it a step farther, I don't actually feel fear. This is me as Sheila, talking to Sheila, having a self-talk conversation.
Okay.
I don't actually feel fear until my higher brain interprets this response. What if I stop assuming my body's reaction means something is wrong? Now, it's so fast that these things happen. We all know this. If we've ever been in that situation, it's so easy to spiral so quickly. May not work the first time, may not work the second time, but that's why just keeping going and looking at it in that different way, eventually you'll be able to pause after the body's initial reaction. And the way I think of this, even if you can't get it together and say, this isn't fear, it's just my brain's quick response. I get to choose what happened next. Even if you can't get all that together, if you interrupt it, you might just start thinking about something else. And that's okay too, because the whole point is you are not getting carried away with the emotion, whatever you can do to interrupt it. And then if I were working with this person, then we would eventually get into, what to do from there, how to think of things in advance and have things ready to say, and then you'll build your confidence there. It's an entire process, but this is definitely the kickoff to it. This is the first step.
All right. Love it. Yeah. We've worked on start to get into the habit. You feeling fear before you even know why. Just take a breath and ask yourself, is this my body reacting automatically? I really feel fear, or can I reframe this moment? It's good to work those muscles and ask yourself the questions.
Yeah. And if you say reframe, you'll probably start singing the song Freeze Frame, and then that's going to make you
Guys,
in a better mood.
We've had a whole episode on this.
Yes, on
Freeze
reframing. On the song Freeze Frame. It was written in the 80s, but what could be better? Your first reaction isn't always the truth. I was just working with a client, and I use the metaphor of social media and advertising. But we were talking about how in the space we were working on with her is if you look at Facebook ads or things that are meant to look like news and they're clearly someone putting them out there for a purpose.
Yes.
There are people who digest that as truth. They just think, I saw it online. You can even make it funnier. If you think about way back in the day, a lot of grocery stores had those really crazy stories in tabloids.
The tabloids?
Yes.
Was that true?
I think they used to be more outrageous when we were younger. I don't know. Maybe
I agree. No, they were.
That's sometimes what your brain and your emotions tell your brain. Back to our anxiety is a liar. But whatever emotion it is, it can be any one of them, any one of the emotions can put something at you as truth. And it's not true. It's just as outrageous as those tabloids. It's not this decision that you say, I will believe what my emotions are telling me. It's all baked in. You're not separating it out. And that's why I talked about the chocolates on the conveyor belt earlier, because what we're going to talk to about the end of the show today is a habit that I think is magical for this, that processes the conveyor belt of chocolates, the emotions, which strips it away from the thought. So you're more a clear vessel, a centered vessel, so that you're not off to the races believing this misnomer based on emotions. All of what we're talking about here, we're trying to show you what is happening without your awareness. And it doesn't mean you're not a genius and amazing and a beautiful soul. You are. This is just the way your systems work together as a human. And it's not something that they teach in school or you talk about or think about. That's why we're talking about it.
They really should teach this in school, though.
Oh, don't get me started on that. There's so many things that I'm like,
I know.
and that's all of this stuff and all of the things that I'm interested in. I've spent so many years diving into so many books and articles, and it's just not available in school. And I think it's the most important things that we can have as humans.
Absolutely. I think they should teach it to young children, right in kindergarten.
Right.
This is what they should be talking about.
And as your brain develops, you would have that awareness.
Yes. Give the children tools to deal with this. Because now we're all adults struggling with this. So.
Right. Well, if you're here and listening to us, you're probably tired of dealing with people who are least likely to be interested in this information. They're just unaware.
Valid point. Yeah, completely.
And thinking they're the best thing ever. That was kind of rude, but it's how I feel.
They're thinking they're like the Antonio Damasio's of the world.
Or the Joe DiMaggio.
The Joe DiMaggio's.
I love that you're obsessed with that name. And I
love it.
Hopefully I don't dig deeper. I always do, my research, and these are things that I've read about for years. But then I'm thinking, okay, I'm talking about this and putting it out there. I hope they're not secretly, they ended up being like a mass murderer or something. Turns out Antonio turned out after that theory and a hypothesis, it went awry for him.
Yeah, not a good background on him. Not a good background.
Check out his True Hollywood story. One of those weird, mysterious deaths.
Right.
Doesn't mean he didn't have a good hypothesis prior, though,
Right. Yeah. He was married 4 times and all 4 wives are dead.
He was on 4 episodes of Snapped. That's not okay.
Oh, Antonio. I think it would be helpful to our listeners. Let's walk through the steps of how to process emotions together using some of the ways you've helped me and others you've coached. Let's bring it to life again.
Yes. First step, checking in with your body before you even think about analyzing the decision. We're just tuning into the physical. Am I feeling tension in my chest, a sinking feeling in my stomach? Those physical reactions are just clues to be investigated further.
Okay, that makes sense. I've noticed this before we were working through this. If I was in a performance review, my hands would get clammy, my stomach felt upset. Just assumed I was nervous, but it was more than.
Yeah, the key is especially in something at work, because there's a lot of repeats. So you can say, does this feel familiar? Your body might be reacting to the past experience, even if the current situation is totally different. If you have a performance review with a boss who's unfair, if you have a new boss who's great, you might still feel that feeling in the performance review. So this tool would be really helpful in that kind of scenario.
Right. Basically, if I feel that tightness in my chest, I need to figure out if it's actually a warning sign or just my brain being overly cautious.
Right. And you and I have worked through that. And I think that's a perfect thing to bring up for our listeners. That is the go-to move for step 1.
Okay. Love it. Step 2 is to label the emotion behind it.
Mm-hmm.
For me, once I notice my body's reaction, what's next?
You would name it. You're noticing your body's reaction. You're just noticing the reaction. But you would, prior to doing these steps, you would just assume something negative, or we wouldn't be talking about it. Are you feeling fear, excitement, doubt? Is it something from your past creeping in?
Yeah, I would name it Antonio. Oh my gosh, Antonio's coming up again in my tummy. My chest is tight. And Antonio, keep it cool.
I love how you're going to name it that, whether it's good or bad. That seems very helpful.
Oh, Antonio's pissed. Antonio's pissed. I could just say that right in my performance review.
Who's this, your husband, your dad? Who's mad?
Yeah,
I don't
what?
understand.
I think you need to take some PTO and figure this out.
Yeah. It's tricky if you assume the worst, but if you pause and ask, okay, I'm feeling fear. Is it based on something real, or am I making an assumption? I like the example of the new boss and the old boss. It could be the same situation, but am I panicking because of how my old boss treated me?
Yeah. Instead of jumping to conclusions, slow down and question where the emotions are coming from.
Yes. And I know you've had great success with this, but that's exactly what our listeners can do. You're interrupting the automatic and you're making sure you understand what's going on with you.
Right.
There's clarity in that.
Yes. The next step would be to create emotional distance. I really like this one, but emotions can feel so real in the moment. How do you stop yourself from overreacting?
Yeah. Anything you can do, again, throughout this process, I'll just keep saying it, is interrupt the brain. One way you can do that, say if I were giving advice to a friend with that same problem, you would never say, hey, you're overreacting, but you'd be able to see it more objectively. And using that little trick to say, if I were giving advice to a friend, just helps you see it more objectively.
Yeah. I know personally I'm way more rational when it's someone else's problem.
Yeah. And that's why for myself, the things I talk about here and anytime I coach, I'm always doing the things myself because I want to know exactly what that's like to be able to help somebody with it. I don't want to ever be the gym coach over on the side blowing the whistle and not running alongside you. I know how hard this is, but that's just a little way to hit step 3 and create a little bit of emotional distance.
Okay. I love it. So if I step back and realize I tell my friend not to worry, then I should probably take my own advice.
I know I repeat this all the time as well, just letting you know I am aware. But if you try these little, well, Jenny, you already know this. I'm talking to our listeners. But if you try these things and get 2% of it right and keep going through these steps, that's where the magic lies. You're not going to have this big well, if you do have this big dramatic awakening, try one, then congratulations and definitely write to us because we'd love to hear about it. But keep working the steps, keep going through the cycle. Then you'll start to learn what works for you. This is just a starting point. Your launching pad.
Exactly. Step 4 is to gather objective information. Okay. But let's say I'm still feeling anxious. How do I know if my emotions are valid or not?
Hopefully, by step 3, creating that distance, this is where you can have that clarity to think, and you're looking for data. And just,
Okay.
what am I actually dealing with here? As much data as possible. This is where you want to get clear on the
Okay.
facts.
So, say I'm nervous about applying for a promotion. I should look at my past performance rather than just feeling like I'm not good enough.
Right. In this case, I love that you brought, because if we think about, sometimes the workplace is toxic, some things are not fair. Sometimes it's based on that you work really hard, your coworkers don't, and they're the ones who get promoted. When we think about actually what the workplace brings to us, there's always heaping piles of things that are curveballs. But the point here is that, let's say you are nervous because your past performance is amazing, but the playing field is not fair. Then
Hmm.
the point of this exercise is to realize that that's the case. When you say that out loud, my performance is amazing and I work really hard and I get results. These people kiss up and I'm not the best at that. Those are the things that we work on, with clients. But then at least when you're talking to yourself about that, you don't internalize all of that negativity of you're not good enough. And then this is that tiny tool with a whole bunch of other things you would want to do, but that'll get you to distance yourself from taking that on. There's solving the problem in the circumstance, and then there's creating these empowering tools so that when you do get to a better workplace, you're not dragging with you all of that weight of the unfairness of the past. So there's a bunch of things going on, but for the sake of this discussion, it's still worth your while to look at the data and say, okay, yeah, like let's just say it's a very stressful workplace. Okay, I am nervous about applying for this promotion, or I am nervous about this performance review, or whatever the interaction is going to be or the situation is. But that doesn't mean that I'm not good enough. I'm anxious because this place is ridiculous.
Step 5 is wait before reacting. What if I still don't know what to do?
Then don't do anything. As much as
Okay.
you can, give yourself time, and this is situation dependent. Sleep on it, step away, in distance. Your emotions, like the conveyor belt of the chocolate, they're gonna process, whether you're actively processing them or not. But emotions, this is a very common saying, but emotions are like waves. You can't keep stress up unless you're fueling that fire for hours and days on end. You
Right.
wait till that dissipates a bit, as much as possible, to make an action.
No, that's true because I've had times where I was sure about something in the heat of the moment, but then later on, as the day progressed, I felt totally different.
Yeah. And you're actually someone who's really good at that, giving yourself time. I think it's really hard to do, but just even again, interrupting your thought process to say, let me give this time and settle and then see how I feel. I'll get back to it later with a little distance and a break.
The final step is to make the decision and accept it. All right, I've checked in with my emotions, I've gathered the facts and waited. Now what?
You own it. You have made the decision.
Okay.
You've made your choice, and now you see what happens. But that is yours to own. And there's a big lesson here. And I know that this is talked about a lot online and that information is out there, but you cannot create what somebody is going to say or do to you, or you cannot create every circumstance. You can only choose how you react to it. That goes both ways. Either way, if you're the catalyst for a situation or the recipient of the situation, you are responsible for your actions. You own it and learn for the next time. You're getting data. The cycle is complete, so you can get the data.
Yeah, I like it. But sometimes it is easier said than done.
And that's why we think of everything, well, as far as what we talk about, everything is tiny cycles, working the muscles. And you're not going to make or break your life on one thing. You did your best with that situation. You take the data that you got from it and you use the best you can. If there's something you could do to follow up if you have a regret on it, that would be an option. But for the learning of this process, you just keep at it. You'll get better and better at it as you go. So working the muscle.
Work those muscles.
Yeah.
Now, I like it because it takes the pressure off making the perfect decision. It just focuses on like, hey, just going to make the best one that I can at that time.
Yes. And I love data from being in a state of action. I guess that if I could phrase my biggest go-to move for any and everything with career stress, that's it, is staying in a cycle of motion, working through all these different steps and tools over and over, learning from them. And you learn more from making a mistake and how to do things different next time than avoiding analysis paralysis, staying stuck. That is where the toxicity just loves to pile up. And you are teaching yourself that you can't handle things. And that's not true. You can, just some things take longer than others to feel like they're a part of your wheelhouse.
Right. Yeah. And I think it makes decision making more manageable instead of just being so overwhelmed by it.
I love this process, and it's definitely something that people can use and customize and tweak to make their own, but that's the basic flow.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, listeners. So next time your brain tries to be a jerk to you, your boss says something, gets you stressed out, just remind yourself to pause, label the emotion, take a step back, check the facts. You can even wait it out a little bit, but then commit. Yes.
You got this.
Absolutely. All right. So listeners, it's time. So Allie mentioned earlier the habit that she loves for helping to process emotions. So tell us the spicy daily processing, Allie.
If we think about our emotions, we've talked about today how they're present and how they can affect us. The ones that we want to always process through, whether we are aware of them or not, are the ones that would cause us feelings of negativity or feelings of stress, anxiety, all of that. And I like to think of some physical terms, spicy feelings. I've even referred to it as shards of glass.
Oh, I like that one.
Okay. That may
I
be
love those because it does. No, if that's what it feels like.
When that awareness comes up and it gets to be too much, there's too many chocolates on the conveyor belt and we're dealing with them too far down the line. That's when they get to feel like shards of glass, but that is there before. This daily processing, making this a habit has been so helpful for me. If you do this as a daily habit, you're catching the chocolates way earlier, proactively on the conveyor belt. I think the best time of day to do this is after work, and you can do this in 2 minutes. If you have 5 minutes, that's even better. And what it is you can sit in your car, you can lock yourself in the bathroom, wherever you can get any space by yourself. And there's a few different ways you can do it. You can there's all these free things on YouTube that are called processing emotions, feeling your emotions, how to process emotions. There's also bilateral stimulation music on YouTube. It's all free. Or you can just put on a song that creates emotion. The whole point is you're bringing up an emotional state. You're making yourself feel on purpose and not in a way to be mean to yourself. You're just acknowledging that there's some guck in there. There's some shards of glass in there. There's some tension in there. And you bring up the emotion either through music or a guided meditation or a guided emotions processing, and you just feel it. You're just making space for it. You're not trying to fix it. You're not trying to get rid of it. You're not trying to push it. You're not trying to do anything. You're just reminding yourself, okay, this is in here. There's spiciness in here. There's edginess in here. There's guck in here, and I can feel it. I'm just feeling it.
Right.
That's it.
Yes. I love it.
That is so simple, and it's hard to believe that just feeling it is helpful. But what it does is it gives yourself data if you do it daily, or at least you do it 5 days a week after work or before work if you can only fit it in then, or at lunch. But it gives you data to show you that whatever emotions come up in the moment, you can handle them. So it's the tool to get at all of what we talked about today. It's to build your confidence in that space.
That's a wonderful topic. We've learned a lot.
Well, I hope our listeners, I hope you found it helpful. We hope you use some of this stuff this week. Thank you so much for joining us today. Enjoy yourself, have some fun, take a breath, and we hope to see you next time. Yes, bye.
Bye.